Hey, my name is Jeremy Miner. I am the chairman and founder of Seventh Level, a global sales training firm based out of Scottsdale, Arizona, Sydney, Australia, and Dubai now. And we are a company that trains salespeople, companies all the way from Fortune 100, 500, SMB, all the way down to individual salespeople selling anything. And the best piece of advice I have ever received in my life, I'm not going to tell you the name, it's that cool, is to make your vehicle, what you drive to work every day, a university on wheels, and always keep learning. That advice right there has allowed me to actually read or hear about 5 different books on audio or reading every single month since I was a 21-year-old kid just getting into sales. That is a lot of acquired knowledge that you can take. So make your vehicle a university on wheels, and you will always succeed because of that.
Ooh. So what was the first book you read or listened to, Jeremy?
The first book I read.
Yeah.
On there. Well, I know one of the first books I read is I went to, when I was a 21-year-old kid, I was just getting into sales at that point, and I went to a Brian Tracy seminar. I'm assuming I probably read one of his books as the very first book. I have about 4,000 books now, which is kind of crazy. So I'm a freaking massive reader. I legitimately read about 3 books a month. And then I listen to about 2 books a month on audio because my office from my house is only like 10 minutes away. Sometimes I wish it was longer so I could have more time to listen to more audiobooks. But I read about 3 books a month times 12 months a year. So that's what, 36 books a month for the last 22 years. And I listen to about 2 audiobooks every month religiously. So you're talking 50 some books every single year for the last 22 years, whatever that math is. So you can acquire a lot of knowledge that way for sure.
Yeah.
You just end up making more money than listening to like political garbage on CNN or some other channel, or listening to the most awesome, greatest, Britney Spears song. No offense, Britney, I love you, but it's probably not going to make me any money. You know what I mean? Not going to develop more skills for me.
Yeah. So who did you learn that from? Was it a first manager, or did you pick that up at Zig Ziglar, or what?
I learned that from Brian Tracy. So I went to an event. Brian Tracy is a good friend of mine. Our first product we launched 3 years ago called Ultimate Closers Masterclass. Brian Tracy and I filmed together. It was kind of interesting because I was this kid at 21 at one of his seminars, and I'm like, he's like the god of sales at that. At that point, I was just like, I didn't know what I didn't know, right? And so I just kept in touch. He knew about my success, the results that I got in selling. And then, somebody on my team reached out to him. We kind of kept in touch on and off, like every 2 or 3 years or so. And then about 3.5 years ago, before we launched, we got in touch with each other. Our people met each other. We liked each other, hit it off, and we did our first product together called the Ultimate Closers Masterclass. So it's kind of a surreal moment for me to go from where I was as a broke, burned out college student to, I'm starting my own company, 20 years later as a sales trainer, and I'm doing my first product with Brian Tracy. It was kind of weird.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. Well, let's bring it to today. So what are you listening to right now?
What am I listening to right now? So I'm listening to a book on audio called, it's by Oren. Here, let me grab it for you. Hold on 1 second. Hold on, I'm going to grab it for you. It's called
Oren Klaff.
Pitch Anything. Yep. So what I like about Oren's stuff is he has a really good understanding of behavioral science. So when I went to college, that's what my major was, behavioral science and human psychology. So when I like to learn, because there's a lot of sales books, even books behind me on those shelves that like I'll read and I'm like, man, I lost brain cells. Like it's so old school, dinosaur ages of selling. They have no idea human behavior. It's like, come on, man. Like you took these techniques from like 1925 and repackaged them and called them something else. Like I lost brain cells. But what I like about Oren is he has a really good understanding of behavioral science and the brain and why people make decisions and or are persuaded to do something and or not persuaded to do something. So when he talks a lot about status frames and authority frames, that rings true to me because that's what I learned in behavioral science at university, actually.
Awesome. So do you have an all-time favorite, Jeremy? All-time favorite book here?
Man, I wouldn't.
Or something you go back to? Maybe you got a reference book?
I'm kind of crazy so some books I read 2 to 3 times. If the book is really, really good, I'll come back to it a year or 2 later because you can't retain all that information. What I do though is I read the book, while I'm listening to the audiobook at the same time. So studies show when you read a book and you listen to the audio at the same time, you retain about I think it's like twice as much information if you just read the book. So I'm very religious about what I read and that I'm listening to at the same time. It's kind of weird.
Wow.
I'm all freakish about this kind of stuff. I'm all about
that's
maximizing
cool.
the time I have to be able to learn everything I can to, obviously train our clients how to sell more,
Awesome. Awesome. That's great, man. Very good. So yeah, I think reading is super important too. I learned, your Carnegie University, interestingly enough, I've heard that quote attributed to Zig Ziglar,
Okay,
not
well,
Brian Tracy.
maybe
So
Brian got it from Zig.
yeah,
Zig got it from
no,
Brian. I don't know.
right? Yeah. Well, I think, all of us, right? All of us need to listen to that. So that's interesting, right? So I find that reading and learning is great, but implementation is really where it's at. And I was doing some research on you here, and I look at your program here that includes some role play, which I think is super strong, man. So you got to talk to me though about this NEPQ. I'm in your Facebook group and I'm looking around, and and it's like a mystery, man. People ask it, nobody ever answers it. So I got to know, what is NEPQ, Jeremy?
Nobody ever asked it.
No, man.
I don't know.
Everybody asks it, but nobody answers it. Like they're like, "Oh, it's Jeremy's system." I'm like, "No, give me an answer." So, Jeremy,
people must be too busy back in there. We got thousands of people back in there. It's going crazy. So, it might be. Let's do this. I'll kind of break it down to you in this way. It might help your audience a little bit more.
Yeah.
According to, like I said, my background in college is behavioral science and human psychology, right? Study of the brain, how a human being is persuaded to do something and or not persuaded to do something. All right. And according to behavioral science, there's actually three forms of communication, three main forms. Now there's subsets of those forms, but these are the three main forms. Okay. And I would suggest have your listeners write this down unless you're driving. And if you guys are driving, be careful out there. Don't run anybody over and then, blame the show. Okay. But I don't want Phil get in trouble over there. So if you're at an office, write this down. So there are three forms of communication, and once you understand the differences in persuasion and where you are now, as far as like your current sales ability, even if you're doing well compared to where you could be, it will completely change everything for you. All right. So the first mode, if you guys want to write this down, of communication, we call that ERA. So it's ERA1 type of sales. So ERA1 type of sales, think more like boiler room selling. Put that image in your mind of boiler room selling, right? So we're the least persuasive. We're the least persuasive according to the data, according to behavioral science, when we tell people things or we attempt to dominate them or posture them or manipulate them or push them into doing something we want them to do, okay? Think about like the show Wolf on Wall Street. Now, I'm sure Jordan Belfort's a great guy or whatever, but the show, makes him that way. Maybe he was that way. I'm not really sure. But, the selling techniques were like, hey, I got a great opportunity for you. And then we talk about the features and the benefits of what we do and why they should go with us and why why our competition sucks and blah, blah, and why they need to do this. It's just like if you tell your spouse that they really, really need to do something for you, and then you push them to do it, what do they typically do back? Well, human behavior 101, most of them push back. All right. So I'll give you a few examples. I actually, I figured you were going to ask me this question, so I wrote down some notes for your audience. So here's some examples of the least persuasive way to sell. Presenting. Yeah, I know. When I say that, events people are like, no, Jeremy, I have to have my 60 slide deck of, the corporate office and the Better Business Bureau awards that we've won and the customer service rankings. And here's all of our clients. I have to go through all these slides and have an hour and a half presentation. And I'm like, well, you can, but most of your prospects are going to zone out because you've lost the frame, right? As Orrin would talk about. So we've got the best this, we've got the best that, which, by the way, doesn't every salesperson say they have the best product or service? Once again, how many salespeople do you know that say their product or service, oh yeah, we're just the fifth best in the market? No one does. They all say they're the best. So when you say things like that, now there's different ways to see that without saying that. But when you come out and say those type of things in a presentation, just so you know, psychologically, subconsciously, your prospects actually trust you less, especially if you talk down about your competitors, because they're used to every single salesperson that's ever sold them anything doing the same thing. So according to the data, it's not very persuasive if your presentations are more than 10% of your entire sales process and conversation. You know what the average salesperson does? About 50%. They need to be down about 10%. All right. And there's a whole art to that. We don't have time to get into that. Telling your story. Hate to tell you this. Nobody cares about your story when you're selling one-to-one. Whose story do they most care about? They care about their story, right? What about giving a sales pitch? We've all been taught that you have to give a great pitch, but according to the science, it's not very persuasive. Like I think you're still on here, but if you ever watch like CNBC and you watch like Shark Tank, right? The entrepreneurs come out and they're ready to pitch their products and services. Take a look at the body language of the sharks. Take a look at Barbara's body language, Mr. Wonderful, Damon John, Mark Cuban, Kevin, whoever's in there. Watch their body language and their facial expressions when the entrepreneurs come out with their pitch. They're like, oh, it's like turn off, all right? And here's the biggest one, assuming the sale. When I say that, it's sales audiences are like, no, I've been taught I've got to assume the sale. I've read every book says I need to always be closing, assuming the sale. But according to the data, very low on the persuasion poll, hence the term sales is a numbers game. That's where it comes from, because those type of techniques cause it to be a numbers game. It triggers resistance, especially if you're in a more, B2B complex sound environment that requires multiple calls and touches, right? So that's the first mode. Now the second mode, and then we'll talk about NEPQ. Second mode is called era 2 type of sales. That would be known more as like what people would now call like consultative selling, right? So we're more persuasive when we have like a discussion. Okay, came out in the mid 80s with a book. Really, one of the first books was Spin Selling by Professor Neil Rackham. You've heard of that, right? So we're taught that we need to find out, we need to sell to the need of the client. We need to ask logical based questions about what their needs are. But what's the potential downfall of the approach when you only ask logical based questions? We call those surface level questions. Well, your prospect is going to give you what in return? Surface level answers, right? And do people buy on logic or emotion? Brain studies prove it's 100% emotion. There's really no debate about that. So if you're asking questions like this, you want to just completely eliminate these, because these trigger a lot of resistance with most, especially A-type personalities, because they've heard them so much. So if you're like, Mary, what's keeping you awake at night? You never want to ask that question. It's a horrible question. Everybody uses it, okay? Or can you tell me 2 problems that you're having the most? Or who besides you would be involved in this decision, okay? See, that type of question, nobody's going to really tell you like, oh, well, let me tell you everybody. And they're not going to tell you everybody in the organization who's going to be involved in the decision. They're like, oh, it's just me and maybe one other person. They're just going to waffle with you because they don't trust you yet. So I might want to take that question and reword it. And I might say, John, can you walk me through your company's decision-making process when it comes to solving challenges like this? Can you walk me through your organization's decision-making process when it comes to solving problems like this? Is much more likely to get them to open up, to walk you through, oh, well, we need to talk with this person. We need to drag in Mary over here at IT or whatever, okay? So they're just rewording of those questions, all right? Or asking them the question up front, like, what sort of budget do you have? Like BANT, like, gotta get rid of BANT. It's so old school, okay? So that's the second mode. It's more persuasive than the first mode, telling your story, pitching, assuming the sale, but you're starting to play the numbers game because very little emotion is brought out of a human being when you're simply asking logical based surface level questions. Now, the third mode, this is what you're asking me. I kind of roundabout came into it. We're the most persuasive according to behavioral science, okay? We're the most persuasive. This is era 3. When we get the prospect to actually persuade and sell themselves. Okay, that's called dialogue. When we ask what it is called, here's the drum roll that you've been asking in our Facebook group. Apparently everybody's been ignoring you. When we ask what are called neuro-emotional persuasion questions, that stands for NEPQ, trademarked over here. Now the key here is, what are those questions? There's certain questions and techniques that we have to learn that actually work with human behavior to get the prospect to pull us in and actually want to engage with us and actually feel comfortable enough to open up to us and really tell us what's going on, okay? Because you can't just go in and be like, hey, Mr. Prospect, go ahead and persuade yourself, and here's the wire details, wires the funds. No, you have to learn specific skilled questions in a step-by-step structure that gets the prospect to sell themselves rather than you trying to do it. So that's a difference between era 1, era 2, era 3. Make sense?
Makes sense. So give me an example of an era 3 type question.
Well, in what stage of the conversation?
Ooh, see, this is good, right? So this is probably why nobody's answering the
I
question,
don't want to throw
because
mud against the
no,
wall here. And
no, hold on, no, hold on. Let's get there. But that makes sense then. Why nobody's answering the question? Because that's too right. There's more to it than just here's what the initials stand for, right?
I'm surprised nobody's answered that. I've seen that in there before. Usually people answer, but maybe they just haven't got you. It's been busy the last couple of weeks.
No, not me. I didn't ask the question. I'm quiet. I'm listening. I'm paying attention.
You're
No, but I just don't. Yeah, no, I just don't see a long answer, because I searched for NEPQ in your Facebook group, right? So I was looking to see what people are saying, right? And you did some videos and that.
There is right when you join the group. There, like, it's pinned at the very top. It actually talks about NEPQ. You probably missed it. It's okay. We forgive you though. So let me give you an example.
I'll have to check that out. Yeah. So give me an example. Let's go early in the conversation. I'm in discovery mode, Jeremy.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the discovery first call, first meeting, Zoom meeting,
sure.
Inbound, outbound link, doesn't matter. Let's talk about towards the 3/4 of the way of that conversation. Let's talk about what we would call consequence questions. So we want to ask the prospect, once we've got them to see what their current situation is. Okay. Some people call that the current state. Okay. We've also got them to see what their future is going to look like. We call that their objective state. Some people call that their future state. We call that the objective state. This is the objectives they want to get to. Okay. Now, what's the gap in between? The gap in between are all of these problems that your advanced questioning has allowed them to see that they have, that they probably didn't know they had when you first started talking to them. Okay. There's a gap there. So once they've seen, here's where I'm at, here's where I want to be here. Oh crap. Here's all my problems holding me back from getting there. We want to rip that away with what's called a consequence question that gets them to defend themselves on why they have to change their situation now, which builds massive urgency for them to do something now, not keep kicking the can down the road and staying in status quo. So, I'll give you kind of a couple of generic ones just because, they're different from industry to industry. Be like, individualize those. Okay, but John, have you thought about what will happen if your company doesn't do anything about solving that? That's a consequence question. Okay. Or let's say, have you considered the possible ramifications if you guys don't do anything about getting that done? Have you considered the possible ramifications if you guys don't do anything about that? Now, you would plug in whatever that is depending on what you sell. Okay. I'm just giving you a generic version. Or let's say, I was just working on a script for a company that we train that sells like lead services to SMB companies, like small businesses. And basically a consequence question for them, because those people are responding to their ads looking for a higher quality lead for their salespeople. That's what they do, right? They provide higher quality leads. So a consequence question for that is, okay, but what happens if you guys don't do anything about this and you keep getting these lower quality leads to your sales team and your numbers keep stagnating another 3, 6, even 12 months from now? Like, what happens then? See, that gets them to think like, if we don't do anything, here's what's going to happen to us. That's a consequence question, an NEPQ consequence question. With me?
With you.
Bunch of boring, nerdy stuff. I know.
No, well, that's interesting, right? As I hear you say those things, it makes sense that those would be more effective than less effective, right? It makes sense that those would happen, right? I mean, for sure. So why, Jeremy, if these, if this exists, right? Why are people not using it? Like, is there some hesitation? Is there some gap that, between where they want to be and where they are, or what?
I think people just don't know what they don't know. I mean, NEPQ is my methodology from my behavioral science background. It's not like this has been around for like 10,000 years. Now, I will tell you, it actually has been around, but not really in a sales process. So the two people that I studied the most who I developed NEPQ from, people were always like, where did you learn NEPQ? How did you do that? Well, it's behavioral science, but a lot of behavioral science just teaches theory. Like, you're not going to take a behavioral science course and they're like, okay, you need to ask situation questions and problem awareness and then consequence questions. And then when they do this, you need to transition into, like, that's not, it's just theory, right? So I took the theory of behavioral science and brought it in as like, okay, my professors are teaching me that the most persuasive way to communicate is over here. What I'm reading from the sales gurus, they're teaching me it's completely over here. Like, this is not adding up. So how do I bring in behavioral science, like human behavior, into the sales process? And it took me, several years to develop what is now known as NEPQ. It wasn't like I was a 21-year-old kid and had it all figured out when I started doing it. But the two biggest people I studied from, that I continue to study from to develop that, was Socrates and Jesus Christ himself. If you go in and you look at their writings and their teachings, they didn't instruct people what they were doing wrong. They didn't tell people what their problems were. They didn't assume the sale with their followers. They asked easy to answer questions that allowed their, if you want to call them prospects or followers, to question their way of thinking, that allowed their situation to keep happening. And because they were able to get them to question their way of thinking, they became what? Open to their way of thinking. That's really what it is. That's really what NEPQ is.
That's interesting. That's very interesting.
I know it's probably a new one for you. Socrates.
No, that's interesting. That's interesting because they seem so very different, right? When I think about Socrates and I think about the work of Jesus Christ, it's very different.
Well, I'm saying
you're telling me
what they asked. I'm obviously.
Oh yeah, no. Of course, yeah. No, I'm not
the
talking
savior
religion
of the world compared to a philosophizer, but I'm saying, like, look at the questions we
Yeah.
have on record they asked, and you can see how it got people to think. And obviously with Christ, we have a very limited amount of knowledge. We have like this much, right? That is still in the Bible, that people decided what was going to be in and what wasn't going to be in. That's a whole nother subject. But if you look at kind of what they were asking, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, I got you. I was tracking with you. I hadn't considered that.
There
So
you go,
that's pretty cool. No, that's cool,
There you
man.
go.
I like that. Right, that's a new connection in my brain, which I appreciate you helping me rewire. So good. No, for real, man. So that's cool. So all right, so let's talk a little bit more here about that. And so we ask these good questions that are really, really more dialogue based, and we get there. I mean, how much time does it take to transition from, the old sales guru into the Socrates, the Socratic method, if you will, the NEPQ method of sales, Jeremy? How long does it take an average person?
No, not much. 30 days. I mean, we have thousands of testimonies. You'll see them even in the Facebook group. We have almost 5,000 testimonials in the first 3 years. And you'll see a lot in the Facebook group. People post. There's probably 10, 15 new ones every single day if you scroll down the feed, but it's pretty quick. It's just like, here's what I always say. It's like you're a Hollywood actor or actress, right? Who's your favorite actor? Just throw me out somebody.
Oh, Ryan Reynolds.
Oh, I love Ryan Reynolds. So Ryan Reynolds, George Clooney, any of those, they're all great, right? So you watch them in the movies, right? Every single thing they say, for the most part, is pretty much 100% scripted. But does it sound scripted? No.
Nope.
It doesn't sound scripted at all, because they memorize their lines. And when you watch Ryan in the movie, you watch him because you feel that he is the character he's playing. You don't sit there and watch a movie and think like, oh, that's Ryan Reynolds. You think of him as the character he's portraying because it sounds natural. And salespeople, this is why selling, like one of the biggest myths is like, oh, he's a born he or she's born salesperson. Nothing could be further from the truth. Nobody's born a natural salesperson. Nobody's born a natural golfer. These are acquired skills that you learn. Learning the right questions to ask and memorizing those questions, and then knowing the tonality and when to pause, like verbal pausing, those type of things. That's all something that's acquired. You're not born out of your mother's womb with advanced questioning and tonality techniques. That's like impossible. So your tonality, your delivery of the questions is equally as important as the actual questions themselves. Like if you think of some of the greatest speakers in the world, okay? And I don't really get into politics. I'm just kind of right in the middle. I've got friends on both sides. I'm just like, you guys do your thing. I'll just focus on training salespeople to sound more like that's what I know. But like, if you look at one of the greatest speakers that I've heard as a president in my lifetime, it would be like President Obama. Okay. And when he was talking, you could feel like you could feel it, because he just didn't say a bunch of cool things, but he would talk and then he would just pause. Power of the verbal pause. I mean, he would be like, blah, 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 blah. And then he would just pause and he would let it sink into his audience. And that moves people. Okay. He was a great communicator that way. So that's just an example. Like Tony Robbins is another one. If you go to a lot of his events, he'll talk or he'll ask a question and he'll just pause, and the audience just goes silent and they just start going into an emotional state. There's a technique that he's using to get them to do that. Obama was trained in the same thing. I can guarantee you that, because You're not born out of your mother's womb with those type of skills. So those type of skills are all acquired. Those type of skills are all taught and can be learned. If you're a salesperson or if you're a business owner and you want to get your salespeople to double and triple and quadruple their results, because what's gotten you here in sales, like the techniques you've been taught, how's it going to get you here? It can't, right? You're not going to work twice as many hours. I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to work 18 hours a day now? That doesn't make any sense. Okay. So selling is all an acquired skill and learning those skills. And if you can learn questions and how to memorize questions. And then that's why we do so much role playing in our training. It's not just virtual training courses, but we have sales trainers, obviously myself, other corporate officers that have been certified in NPQ that do the role playing, the advanced tonality training, not just in virtual courses, like I said, but also in group trainings. That's why we get so big results so soon for most people, because it's all about role playing it and taking action on it, not just hearing it, as you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, action is where it's at. That's what folks need in order to do that. So let's give them an action, Jeremy. Obviously, right, the one thing they can do to get started is, you've got a nice resource group there. It's salesrevolution.group.
Sure.
That's the Facebook group. So I appreciate that. And while I was teasing you about your group, there's a lot of value there for sure. So got to give you a little bit of a hard time.
If they want to learn, because we just, I obviously didn't have time. I just gave them kind of an hors d'oeuvre, with a few different NPQ questions. But if they want to learn more of those questions for different sales situations and scenarios they're in, because we train hundreds of different industries at this point. Like some industries we train, I'm like, I didn't even know that was an industry. Like we had a company that just got started with us maybe a few weeks ago. It's a seatbelt manufacturer out of Berlin that sells seatbelts to like BMW and Land Rover. And I'm like, oh, I guess seatbelts have to be sold. I never even thought about that. That makes sense, So it's like sometimes you just never think about it, right? So if they want some questions like that, they're welcome to join our free Facebook group, the salesrevolution.group. So just go to salesrevolution.group. Right when they join, somebody in my team, so check your DMs on your Facebook Messenger, and somebody in my team will message you a free course called the NEPQ 101 mini course. You're just going to have some different questions, different scenarios where you can use those questions in different sales situations you're in. You go through that. Just that free course is going to help you sell more than what you're doing now. So they're welcome to do that if they want to learn those skills. We go live in the group about 3 or 4 times a week as well with different trainings and Q&A. So they're welcome to join if they want to learn those skills for sure.
Awesome. So other than joining the Facebook group, Jeremy, if folks want to get started along this path into asking better questions, where would you have them start? What would be one action you'd have them take today that they could be stronger?
Join the Facebook group first, because that's going to give them some skill level just to see kind of what we do. And then if they obviously want to learn more advanced skills than that, like our clients are doing, just have them, message me or somebody, just have them message us in the group. And somebody will reach out to them and message them different options, different training options that we have. And we got like 20 different training programs at this point. It all depends on the industry they're in. Let's say they're an individual salesperson. We weigh in like how much they're making now, like what type of commissions compared to where they want to be. And typically once we know those details, like what the gap is for them, then we can arrange like the best training that's going to get them the fastest, biggest results, the quickest. And if they're a business owner and they want their salespeople to get trained like we have, same thing, just have them message us in the Facebook group, and somebody will message them back more details and schedule with them to really find out what's going on, with here's where they are, here's where they want to be, what's the gap, what are they missing there that's preventing them from getting there. And once we know the gap, it's easier for us to really solve that gap with what we do.
Okay. So one more question here, Jeremy. So you listen to a lot of books. Is there some secret to listening to books? I know you said you read the book too, but to getting through books more rapidly, I mean, do you 2X it? Do you have a certain app? Any secrets or insights for folks?
On the audiobooks, I listen to it 1.5 speed. 2 speed is too fast for me. My brain just doesn't comprehend. I do read very fast. I'm a very fast reader. I took a course in like how to read fast, but in the same sense, I don't read a book just to go through a book and count it up as a number. I read a book to gain information that I then can say like, okay, this is good, but we can even make this better by doing this, or, rewording that question this way. Like we call it NEPQing it, if that makes sense, like putting the NEPQ spin on it. So it's about marking the book. It's about, underlying things. Like when I go through a book, it's like a college textbook. Like I am studying it to learn something from it, not just to read it and count it as another number. If you just go through books like that, you're just not going to learn that much for sure.
Great suggestion. Good stuff, Jeremy. So much good stuff today, sharing the 3 forms of communication, how to not be the wolf of Wall Street and instead.
No. Hey, I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying the movie portrays him that way. Kind of boiler selling. It might have worked in the 80s, but we're in 2022 now.
Oh, come on. Yeah, that doesn't work. So,
We
so
know
good.
that.
Yeah. So good stuff, Jeremy. I appreciate it. Folks, if you're listening, you're thinking, oh, I want to get more, check out salesrevolution.group. Pretty simple there. You can get connected there. Lots of free resources. Jeremy, thanks so much for your time today, man. I learned a lot. I appreciate you. Thanks, man.
Phil. That was a great interview. You're like the Dr. Phil of interviewing. I love it.
Yeah. I would rather be Larry King, but I appreciate that.
Oh, Larry King. Jeremy. I just slapped you in the face, man. I thought that was a compliment. You're pretty good.
No, I want to be even better. No, I want to be aspirational, right? So, right. So, and Dr. Phil, I got called that in high school before Dr. Phil was a thing. So I should have bought the domain then.
You have moved up from Dr. Phil to Larry King status. I love it. I could see that.
Right. And Larry's dead. So,
And you got the glasses too. You kind of got the glasses, going. I like it. Yeah.
11 wives? No.
You got
my wife. No, I don't.
See, that's why when he passed away, his net worth was way down because he was married so many times. I'm like, man, you got to pick.
Well, he just shared it, man. It's like charity, right? You share the love. That's what you got to do, right?
There you go, man. I appreciate you on the show. It was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jeremy.